Just want to say thanks for everyone that's on the webinar today. As I said, we're from Citation Group. We'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar about workplace conflict and resolution tactics that work. Before we dive into the presentation, I just want to cover off a few housekeeping rules. If you've got any questions during the webinar, don't use the chat box. The Q&A feature is the best. That's at the bottom of your screen. That's the best box to use. And what we'll do is we'll answer as many questions that we can at the end of this session. Sometimes we get inundated with questions. So if we can't get through them all, we will aim to reach out to you individually. You can send us your email if you've got an urgent issue. We'd like to jump on that and give you as much free advice as possible. So please put your email address in there or something, and we'll reach out to you today if possible, at the latest tomorrow. Yes, today's webinar is being recorded. I'm doing a fabulous job getting all tongue-tied. And for those of you who would like to access it, obviously we'll make this session available to you via email. Okay. So today we're discussing workplace conflict, managing these disputes, and how you can resolve them at work through our support. Look, we've got quite a few people joining our webinar. So given the high attendance, I'm guessing that many of you are here because you know how difficult it is to manage these situations. And of course, how high risk it can be for individuals within a business that are running the business. So whether you're the GM or the office manager or the HR manager, or indeed the director, it can be high risk. You can be personally liable for getting things wrong. Actually, if you take a note and Google Section 550 of the Fair Work Act, that makes very interesting reading for people who are in charge of HR within a business. So I'm really glad that you've joined us today, and I hope that by the time you finish this webinar, you'll walk away with some very useful tips and some practical advice about how to minimize the risk that's going on in your business. Outside of our topic, we're happy to help you with any other issues that you've got. So once again, feel free to ping us in the Q&A if you want some, one-on-one consultation, or indeed, reach out to us following this, and we'll be able to help you with all sorts of issues. Now, today our webinar will be presented by Amelia Adhard. So Amelia is a seasoned workplace relations professional here at Citation Group. She services our clients on the HR advice line that we have. So we've got a very interesting service model, which I'll take you through in a moment. And she offers them a huge range of support and guidance on all sorts of employment-related matters. Amelia is like having your own full-time HR professional within your business, but without the massive dollars attached to it. A little bit about me. So I've been working in this industry for around about 11 years. I'm a business development manager here at Citation Group. And I work with businesses like yours for one-on-one consultations, a bit of high-level and free advice, ascertain any gaps, bring you up to speed with the latest legislative requirements in terms of making sure that you're fulfilling your obligations. So if you'd like to have a chat to us in regards to that, once again, absolutely, we'll offer as much time as we can to meet with you and or your directors, to really kind of ascertain where you're at and perhaps where you need to get to. All right. So if you haven't attended one of these webinars before, a little bit of information about Citation Group. So we've been around for 30 years as a law firm. That's when we were born, as employment law firm, supporting Australian and Kiwi businesses, providing workplace compliance solutions that create better workplaces. And so we offer all sorts of services now, from HR, health and safety, migration law. We're the leaders in ISO and NDIS accreditation and certification. So once again, we'd be happy to talk through any of those services that we can offer a bespoke solution to your business with. Okay, but today we're here to talk about Citation HR. Now, we've got a complete service model that is a perfect fit for small to medium business owners and larger businesses. And it starts with, we've got this 4-square service model. So it's a subscription-based service. It's not a billable hours service. You come on board between a 1 and a 5 year contract. So that's up to you. We help you tailor and package a solution that suits your needs. This would be following a meeting from me, for instance, or one of my colleagues. And it starts with the 24/7 advice line, which is where Amelia works with her team. And you can reach out to them unlimited and talk to them on a number of topics. And they will strategize, analyze, and strategize a solution for you. It's then mostly given to you in writing, and then you move forward and facilitate whatever it is. It can be a performance plan or a termination. There's a myriad of things that we can help you with, award rates of pay. There's software that we offer with our service as well. It's no extra cost. It comes with the service, and Amelia's team will help you manage that software in conjunction with their advice. There's a massive amount of resources on there, huge library of resources that our lawyers look at every couple of months to ensure that it's up to date and compliant with the legislation. Some of them are templated, such as a performance improvement plan. It's fairly stock standard across the industry, or an investigation into bullying harassment is another sort of templated sort of process that we can help you design, map out, deliver it, and then you hit certain points, and then you'd call Amelia, say halfway through it or something along those lines, and then we'll help you wrap up the situation. So it's end-to-end support. There is an audit that we give you. So as part of your journey with us, we will do a comprehensive audit of your business and making sure that you're paying people correctly, review your position descriptions, cross-reference them with the awards. There's a lot of times when position descriptions cross-pollinate awards, so we can give you that kind of level of expertise to make sure that you are indeed paying people correctly. And then it flows through to contracts and policies. So we want to make sure that your contracts and policies with us are tailored, not cookie cutter. So you'll get a full-time, part-time, casual subcontractor agreement from us, policies and procedures from an HR perspective. If you decide to employ us for health and safety, we're experts in all the jurisdictions of law, and including psychosocial laws. So we'll give you tailored health and safety policies and procedures and manuals to make sure that you're compliant, as well as control measures to make sure that we're minimising risk of harm, including claims through a Fair Work perspective. And that leads me on to the advice promise that we give you. So advice promise offers an enormous amount of value for money for our clients. You'll call Amelia's team. They'll ask you what's wrong. You'll have an objective. You'll say, Maury stole something and I want to terminate his employment or something along those lines. And then we'll go, all right, well, it's not as easy as that. Let's have a look. Let's do a deep dive. And then we'll basically map out a strategy in line with your objective. You'll follow that strategy using the software as well. You'll come back to us. Let's say it does result in termination and that employee runs off to a no-win, no-fee lawyer. That'll come back to us. Citation Law will take over. They will represent, defend, and pay for that litigation as your representation through that Fair Work claim. So from a teleconference all the way through to courts, you won't be out of pocket in regards to that. So that's the advice promise, and it offers an enormous amount of value over and above Amelia's team's value, which is also exceptional. Because no small business can afford full-time HR, employment relations professionals or health and safety professionals. And obviously our service makes it very affordable for small to medium businesses. There's compliance training as well in our software. And that just is like the cherry on the top in terms of control measures and proving that you're consulting your team around bullying, harassment, or respect in work. You can assign these e-learning modules on an individual or mass basis or a bulk level, and our software tracks usage and sets tasks and all that type of stuff, so we can follow up and make sure that Maury has completed his bullying harassment training, etc., goes on. So we're really kind of like that full-time equivalent, but without the massive costs. So, and as I said, I'm happy to go into that with you on a one-on-one basis to sort of really understand what it means for your business, because no client of ours pays the same price. You can package up the service options we've got for you, and then it will depend on your headcount and all that. So I'll be happy to chat with you offline about that. All right, well, that's all from me from the moment. We will be checking in. There's a few little spots where we'll give you time to perhaps register your details if you've got any Q&A questions. But feel free to dump them in the Q&A box as we go along. Don't wait till the end. And what I'll do now is I'll hand you over to Amelia to discuss today's topics. And I hope you enjoy the webinar and you get a lot out of it. Over to you, Amelia.
Thank you for that one, Maury. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. That was a really good introduction. Covered a lot of important points there that we'll dive into a little bit deeper as we go along today. But as Maury reiterated multiple times, if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A function, but also reach out. You can speak to people like Maury who can give you some more information about how we can support your business directly, which can be really helpful. But we do have a bit to cover today, and I know we're probably cramming into everyone's lunchtime, so I'm going to jump straight into it. Today's agenda, we're going to touch on some real life examples of workplace disputes, how you can avoid making these same mistakes, and we'll have an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end. So to understand how to best approach the management of workplace disputes, we must first understand and learn to identify what a workplace dispute actually is. So conflict is all too common in Australian businesses, and disputes and complaints can happen at any workplace. According to the Fair Work Ombudsman, a dispute exists when one or more people disagree about something and the matter remains unresolved. Often disputes can be settled quickly and informally in the course of everyday work. However, if parties can't agree on a way forward, or if the dispute is about a serious matter, you might need to take a more formal approach. Best practice employers have simple, fair, confidential, and transparent dispute resolution procedures in place. And these employers take disputes seriously and address issues quickly and effectively so they don't escalate. In today's recruitment market, keeping and holding on to good staff is of paramount importance. Workplace conflict creates stress, reduces confidence and motivation, and it leads to more absenteeism and higher rates of employee turnover, whether that's by choice or by dismissal. Every workplace can enjoy the benefits of a best practice approach to dispute resolution. Things like a greater employee productivity through increased job satisfaction, improved employee retention, reduced stress for managers and employees, better relationships with employees, reducing the costs that come from resolving disputes externally. So things like Maury was touching on, legal fees associated with dealing with claims made by employees against their employers. So we'll jump into the real life examples now, and we'll start with an example on managing a complaint. So, two employees, Sam and Josh, have been excluding a new employee, Lara, from conversations, and Lara has raised this with her manager, Kim. Kim then pulls both Sam and Josh aside while working and states they are leaving Lara out and the pair need to start being more inclusive. So, we'll touch on how we can avoid the risks in this situation. Firstly, I would suggest we conduct a well-being check-in and discuss the complaint with Lara. If a formal complaint has been raised by Lara, then you'd need to commence an investigation process. So you'd provide an invite letter to Sam and Josh individually to separate meetings to discuss the allegations that have been raised. Now, employers must always offer a support person to be present if the employee wishes, and if an employee mentions halfway through a meeting like this that they now require a support person, the meeting must stop and convene once a support person is present. So we always say it's a best practice to give the employee 24 hours notice and offer for that support person to be present. It gives them ample time to locate a support person if they want it, but also to review the allegations so that they're actually prepared to respond during the meeting. Now, during the respective meetings, you need to allow Sam and Josh to make comment on the allegations. Employers must always allow employees a chance to reply to the allegations separately and in a proper forum. This gives Sam and Josh the opportunity to raise any mitigating circumstances for consideration. So these are things like underlying reasons that are contributing to their behaviour and their treatment of Laura. Whilst it might not excuse their behaviour, it could provide a little bit more context. Maybe there's something else going on with Laura that we need to explore as well. If possible, it's always a good idea to have a third party sit in on the meetings to take notes for reference and compliance in the investigation process. And after their respective meetings, take time to consider the responses provided by each employee, and based on the information that's available, including those responses and any evidence that might be available. And of course, and I believe it's actually Lara, not Laura. I mixed up the names there, but of course, Lara's statement as well needs to be considered. We need to make a decision about whether the allegations were substantiated or unsubstantiated. unsubstantiated. In an investigation process, it's really important that we never assume something has occurred. The process is always innocent until proven guilty. So we really need to find that evidence there. And at the end of the day, it's on the balance of probabilities based on the information that you have available. If necessary, you'll also need to manage any disputes that arise post-investigation process. And it's always important to make sure to keep a record of the investigation process itself. I know Maury talked a lot about our software. That Citation HR software is a great place to not only access the templates to assist you in this process and conducting these meetings and inviting people to them, but it's also a really great place to maintain records. You can have an employee file and keep everything on there as well. So really good resource. I'm going to touch on managing harassment or discrimination. So if an employee dispute is serious in nature and is involved bullying and harassment or discrimination, this may lead to either a warning or in some instances, termination. The definition of bullying is a person or group of people repeatedly behave unreasonably towards another worker or group of workers, and that behavior creates a risk to health and safety. Some examples of bullying include behaving aggressively towards others, teasing or playing practical jokes, pressuring someone to behave inappropriately, excluding someone from work-related events, and unreasonable work demands. I'll touch on the definition of discrimination as well. So, unlawful workplace discrimination under the general protections in the Fair Work Act 2009 occurs when an employer takes adverse action against a person who is an employee or prospective employee because of one or more of the following attributes of that person. So, things like race, color, sex, sexual orientation, age, physical or mental disability, marital status, family or carers' responsibilities, pregnancy, religion, political opinion, national extraction, or social origin. So under the general protections in the Fair Work Act, there are a number of remedies and penalties for adverse action on discriminatory grounds. Where the Federal Court or Federal Circuit and Family Court of Australia determines that a person has contravened the discrimination protections under the Fair Work Act, the court may make any order that it considers appropriate, including orders for injunctions, reinstatements, and/or compensation. Something else to note about general protections is that the compensatory figure or the compensation amount is uncapped. So it can be to any monetary amount. It's quite significant for small business employers or medium-sized business employers, as it can that cost can really affect the productivity of your business and its overall operation. Now, if an employee has been engaged in any harassment or bullying of any kind, this needs to be managed immediately as liability falls on the employer. So it's absolutely crucial. I wanted to touch on serious misconduct as well. So this is a step above kind of your standard sort of misconduct. Serious misconduct involves an employee deliberately behaving in a way that is inconsistent with continuing their employment, causing serious and imminent risk to the health and safety of another person or to the reputation or profits of their employer's business. It includes things like theft, fraud, assault, sexual harassment, or refusing to carry out a lawful and reasonable instruction that is part of the job. So when an employee has acted in a manner consistent with this definition of serious misconduct, this may result in summary dismissal. And what that means is the person can be dismissed without notice. However, we recommend before engaging in any sort of summary dismissal, you need to be careful because terminations for serious misconduct can have potential risks and they need to be assessed before going down that path. So even if someone's done something really bad, it's really important to reach out to someone like us and my team, as we can help you assess those risks. You might not see them on the surface, and make sure that we're following a process that's going to put you in the best position to mitigate those risks. We can't stop the claim, but we can definitely put you in a position to defend yourself if a claim does eventuate. So in instances where termination is not an option due to risks, the employer may decide to issue the employee with a formal warning instead, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on in the presentation. I'm going to jump to another example now around heat of the moment resignations. And it's actually funny because I've had quite a few clients have this happen in the last week or so. So I think it's quite a prevalent one to touch on during today's webinar. So, gossip has started within a business. The rumor is employees Tim and Helen are in a relationship. The manager Simon pulls Tim and Helen aside and explains to them that they should keep their relationship more secretive as everyone is talking about it. Now, Helen is quite disgruntled and vehemently denies being in a relationship with Tim. After 10 years of employment with the company, Helen decides to resign and the company accepts her resignation effective immediately. Few warning bells going off there. So I want to touch on how we would avoid risks in that situation. We wouldn't ideally discuss the allegations of Tim and Helen being in a relationship unless it was substantiated that a relationship between the two is actually interfering with work or it's needing to be managed in relation to professionalism. We would advise to instead manage the employees that are spreading the rumours by discussing professionalism in relation to company policies and procedures. These are moments where having policies and procedures in place, such as an employee handbook or code of conduct, comes in handy. Having these can mean that the performance management can link directly to those signed or agreed to policies, which outlines professionalism and expectations, and it can be, or outlines, and they need to be adhered to in order to avoid a toxic workplace environment. Now, an employee handbook and a code of conduct are both documents that can be generated through the Citation HR software. We have many policies. It's likely that if you can't find it, we have one. And we always encourage people to reach out to us because we can definitely tailor these sorts of things to suit the specific needs of your business. So the second aspect of that factual scenario is an employee who resigns heat of the moment. So someone who resigns the heat of the moment when they're angry or upset may not have made a rational decision to terminate the employment and might actually regret it. Now, an employer should consider giving the employee the opportunity to retract their resignation after they've had time to calm down. An employer that doesn't allow an employee to retract a heat of the moment resignation may be at risk of an unfair dismissal claim, particularly if there's external pressures that led to the person's resignation. So in the example that we had, Helen resigned because she got questioned about her relationship with Tim, made her uncomfortable, and it led to her resignation after some extended tenure with the business. Now, I will actually hand over to Maury before we jump into our next section, and he's got some offers to discuss with you guys today.
Thanks, Amelia. Awesome information so far. And, every issue creates a paper trail. And that's a bit of a mantra in our industries: paper trail, paper trail, paper trail. Don't just let discussions be that. Make sure you document them. Everything's got to be technically done, like Amelia's example of inviting a witness to a meeting, giving 24 hours notice. If you don't do that before you give someone a warning letter and terminate, you're going to lose a Fair Work claim. So it's those type of things that are just so important to understand. And you're not expected to understand. Well, actually, Fair Work expects you to understand everything, but we understand that's not realistic in small business when you're wearing so many different hats. So hope you're enjoying the information. I can see the Q&A box is starting to populate a few questions, and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. And we just want to offer you this one-on-one love. So if you feel like you want to meet with us, if you're finding that this is raising some issues and you've got some challenges in your workplace that you need to address, we'll be happy to meet with you. Please feel free to scan the QR code and put in your details, and then we'll get in contact with you after this as a matter of priority to book in a complimentary consultation with you. Okay, so we can give you some high-level advice. Unfortunately, in those consultations, we can't put anything in writing, but we can certainly map out what you need to do. And obviously, if you're interested in what we do, we can certainly help you understand what that would mean commercially, and then see if we're a good fit for you, like we are with many thousands of other businesses. All right, so yes, as I said, feel free to scan the QR code. We'll give you a few seconds to do that, and keep those questions coming. We'll address them at the end of the webinar. I think it's back to you, Amelia.
Yeah, I'll give everyone maybe 10 more seconds before I flick that slide away. I mean, it is being recorded today, so people are welcome to go back and scan that code at another time if you don't quite grab it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll jump I'll jump into our next example today just to keep it moving along, conscious of time. Okay, so jumping back into our final real life example in relation to reasonable business requests. So, manager Simon asks his junior colleague Kelly over Teams to urgently move her jobs for the day and focus on the action items in the sales system instead. Kelly notes to Simon she's a bit stressed by the workload at the moment, and Simon messages stating, "We'll handle that along with your stress once the sales replies have all been done." Kelly then speaks to her general manager, noting she'll be heading home as she's overwhelmed with the workload and is stressed, therefore unable to work the remainder of the day. All too common, this one. All right, so avoiding risks in this situation. We would initially touch base with Kelly. We'll call her in for a well-being check in a check following her notes of stress within the workplace. This can be done formally or informally initially. So I let her take the leave if she's got to take the day, wait for her to return to work, and then bring her in for a well-being check. In a world in which is more online now than ever, having well-being check-ins to manage stress and workloads is absolutely critical. Best practice employers, I should say, would be able to check in with employees every so often to make sure the workload isn't too much and that they feel heard. The business can also offer the employee access to employee assistance programs or government funded services. Reasonable management action that's carried out in a reasonable way is not bullying. So, an employer or manager can make decisions about poor performance, take disciplinary action, direct and control the way work is carried out, and management action that isn't carried out in a reasonable way may be considered bullying. So there's a distinction between both of them. Noting that, of course, there is different managerial styles and the way the employee is actually communicated to will help influence whether it is a reasonable management direction or not. So I want to take some time to touch on some general tips. So we've touched on some really kind of niche scenarios, but I think there is many different areas where disputes arise within the business and we just don't have the time to cover them all. So I think looking at it as a bigger picture and touching on some key sort of tips and tricks is also really important. So, consultation and cooperation in the workplace. So, consultation means asking for and considering employees' views when making decisions. Cooperation means working together harmoniously to find solutions. Consultation is important during major workplace change. This means any change to the business that will affect employees in a significant way. For example, different working hours, different duties, work locations, and redundancies. Employers who take a consultative and cooperative approach still have the right to make the final decision at the end of the day. However, employees who have had the opportunity to be part of the process are much more likely to accept the change and are less likely to feel anxious or fearful. So, being consulted about important decisions in the workplace can improve an employee's engagement with their work. Another point is accepting conflict. Remember that conflict is natural and happens in every ongoing relationship. Since conflict is unavoidable, you just have to learn how to manage it. That's the biggest aspect there. Be a calming agent. Regardless of whether you're being a soundboard for your colleagues or you are dealing with your own conflict, your response to conflict can escalate or decrease the intensity of the problem. To be calming, provide an objective or neutral point of view. Will help you plan how you're going to work with the other party to achieve a resolution. Listening actively is also key. So, work through how you and your employees feel, identify what the specific problem is and what impact it is having on the business. Also, take an opportunity to analyze the conflict. This will help you clarify the specific problem. So, some questions that you might ask are: what triggered the conflict? How can the conflict be resolved? Is there any external factors that are impacting this and contributing to the conflict? Is there a bigger issue going on behind conflict within the workplace? You need to model neutral language. So when people are in conflict, they use inflammatory language such as profanities, name calling, and exaggerations that can generally escalate the conflict. It's important to remain calm and use appropriate language. You also need to be able to separate the person from the problem. So view the problem as a specific behavior or set of circumstances rather than attributing negative feelings towards the whole person. This approach makes the problem much more manageable. Working together. That's kind of key to everything, I feel, in a workplace. This requires that each person stop placing blame and take ownership of the problem, make a commitment to work together, and listen to each other to solve the conflict. Focus on the future, so very forward thinking. Often, the best way to take ownership of the problem is to recognize that regardless of the past, you need to create a plan to address the present conflict and those that might arise in the future. You also need to be specific. When problem solving, you need to be very specific. Clarify ambiguous terms that each person may interpret differently. And I think one of the most important things, I know I've said that about a few points, but I think one of the most key things is maintaining confidentiality. So encourage others who are in conflict to deal directly with the person they're in conflict with. Avoiding conflict and venting to others tends to escalate the conflict, and it fuels that rumor mill. In some situations, it's necessary to initiate performance and disciplinary processes to manage workplace disputes. You'll see on the slide here some really kind of basic steps around performance management. So, step one, invite the employee to a performance management meeting. It's best practice to provide the employee with 24 hours notice and that offer for a support person to be present that I spoke about earlier. Step two, during that meeting, work with the employee to create a performance management plan. Make the plan as detailed as possible. Avoid using ambiguous language and not reasonable business expectations relating to policies and procedures. You can also manage with a warning if you need to as well. Something I really want to kind of press on around developing a performance management plan is making sure the goals on the plan are SMART goals. So making sure that they're actually measurable, that they can be kind of achieved within a reasonable time frame, and that they're actually as descriptive as possible as to what actions need to take place to achieve those goals. We want to set employees up for success. That is the point of a performance improvement plan, is to try and keep them within the business and performing, of course. Step three, set goals for a performance management plan. As I just touched on, within the performance management plan, it needs to be detailed and provide examples of how to manage expectations in relation to the dispute if necessary, and potentially initiating training on dispute resolution for individuals and businesses as a whole as a result. I know Maury mentioned at the beginning our compliance training that we have available on the platform. That also includes things like refreshers on performance and expectations around that. And we also offer training for managers on managing performance management. So there's lots of things like that available. Really key to access those resources as well. Step four, build a performance review system. So conduct check-ins throughout the duration of the review period to provide further guidance and support. Step six, develop strong feedback giving skills. So make sure the employee also feels heard and not just punished. And step six, ongoing employee performance management, supporting the employee on an ongoing basis, of course. If underperformance persists beyond the review period or the dispute has brought rise to conduct related issues rather than performance, formal disciplinary action may be appropriate. Now, a formal warning is a letter that sits on an employee's file for future reference. It outlines performance or misconduct concerns and an action plan of what the employee needs to do to improve. A formal warning should be in the form of a letter to the employee and should include reference to your verbal conversations and warnings in the past and include any key dates. Specify details of the areas where your employee is underperforming and always provide examples. Reference a number of warnings that letter particularly is. So if it's, your second written warning or your first and final written warning, it's really key to outline where that warning sits. Create an action plan and communicate dates that you plan to check in with your employee. Make it clear that another written warning could be issued or employment could be terminated if expectations are not met. And reassure your employee that a warning is confidential. It's also best to set up a meeting with the employee to discuss the warning. You should always discuss the specifics of a written warning letter with your employee prior to physically delivering it, as it allows them to ask an opportunity to ask questions and clarify any issues or concerns before they receive and review it in writing. Before we finish up with the content portion of this webinar today, I wanted to touch on some general protections and claims, and we did really touch on that at the beginning, but just rounding that process out. These are claims that are available to all employees, regardless of their employment type or length of employment. These claims are available to employees who believe adverse action has been taken against them for accessing a workplace right. As discussed earlier, adverse action can include dismissal of an employee by encompassing a range of other actions, such as prejudicing the employee, injuring the employee in his or her employment, or discriminating against them. Altering the position of an employee to the employee's prejudice or injuring the employee in his or her employment is a broad and additional category of adverse action, but it includes situations in which an employee is in a worse position after the employer's actions than before the actions. As a result, a deterioration has been caused by the employer's intentional acts, and the employee has been deprived of one or more immediate practical incidents of employment. Employees are also able to bring adverse action claims on the basis that they allege that they have been discriminated against. So, for example, where they allege they have been denied a promotion because of their age or dismissed because of their religion. The protection also extends to prospective employees, and that is key here. So, those candidates that you're interviewing, they are also falling within this sort of realm of potential general protections risks. They might allege that they've not been offered a job for discriminatory reasons.
Mm.
Adverse actions claims can occur when an employer terminates an employee and also when an employee feels as though an unfair process has occurred. The Fair Work Commission has the right to determine the full outcome of the matter in relation to damages. And I'm going to hand back over to Maury now to give you guys another opportunity to scan this code.
Thanks, Amelia. Such important information, and there's an enormous amount of it as well. And this is the thing about the Fair Work sort of landscape, is that they expect you to know what major corporates know, and that's just completely unfair. And that's where we come into it. And everything we've kind of explained here is a best practice for a business to be able to prove yourself innocent, because there is a reverse burden of proof within legislation. So whether it's general protections claim or an unfair dismissal, if you have to fess up to Fair Work, they're going to say, well, show us what you did to make yourself right instead of the employee. So there's always two different perceptions. The employees have got their fingers on the pulse with got Dr. Google and think they know everything. And employers are sometimes scrambling either to catch up or, they do have great processes and policies, etc., in place. And it all starts with that legal foundation. And then you build on that. So look, if you do want to meet us, if you do have some tricky situations, we've got quite a few questions in the Q&A box. We won't be able to answer them all today, but we will be happy to meet with you one-on-one. So if you do have a situation, please scan the QR code and log your details so we can contact you immediately, book in an appointment with myself or one of my colleagues, and we will give you that goodwill, that complimentary consultation. We can even have a look at your policies and procedures, talk about closing the loopholes bill, which is one of the latest legislative changes. So there's lots we can chat about. So feel free to scan that. I'll give you a few moments. Pardon me. All right, great. Well, we've got a few questions here, Amelia. So are you ready to tackle some of them?
Hit me with them. Let's
Yeah.
go.
All right, let's have a look. I've got one here that says, my worker has walked off site due to a dispute with their manager and has said that he's refusing to finish work I sent him. So do we assume that this is his resignation? It's like an abandonment of employment, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I wouldn't automatically assume that. The employee hasn't indicated I'm resigning. There hasn't been any sort of written communication that would indicate that. So you can't assume that he's resigned just because he's left work there. We got to do a bit more digging. I would suggest we engage in an investigation process. So that process we discussed right at the beginning of the presentation, and determine the reasonability of his refusal to finish work. So what was going on? In the first instance, the business is always encouraged to, of course, reach out to the employee and organise a time to meet and discuss the situation, and just, if he's gone for the day, I'd touch base with him and just make sure he's not planning to return to work for the day. And if he wants to take leave, take leave, and upon his return to work, then we would discuss what's happening. And if it was just a blatant refusal to work, then you might go down a disciplinary path, but we wouldn't assume it's resignation until that's the term that's actually used.
Okay. Fantastic. Now, this is very common. I've kind of come across this a few times.
Yeah.
An employee and their manager don't get along very well, and the employee is asking for a change in reporting line. So, what should we do here?
Yeah, that is a common one. I guess that's another thing about relationships. Not everyone gets along in the workplace, and you're going to have that. That's definitely very natural. I think the first thing you want to do is understand why these two people don't get along. Perhaps there's an underlying issue. Is someone being bullied? Is there a misuse of power? And I think if there is in those situations, the business has an obligation to investigate it and understand from both workers in separate meetings what the concerns are and where they might be, whether they're just butting heads or there's actually been something that's happened. Then, depending on the circumstances, it'll determine whether a change in reporting line might be reasonable or not. Sometimes it is warranted, I'd say, in very minor, it's not minor, I should say. It's in very few cases it's warranted, um, but it's good to understand why and if there is an underlying reason.
Okay. Um, Here's another one that's common. So, you've followed the process, you've sent an invite to a disciplinary meeting, and someone's asking, can my employer refuse to attend a meeting to discuss their performance?
Okay. It can be a bit tricky, that one, particularly when there's limited information about the context of that. Very similar to the last question you asked me, we'd want to know why they're refusing to attend that meeting. Is the person running the meeting of a particular concern? That sort of thing. It really is going to depend on the reasons for refusal. I would encourage you to speak with the employee and determine why they don't want to attend. Sometimes they've got conflict concerns and they don't feel comfortable in meetings. And whilst you might feel that way, it doesn't excuse your participation in meetings because that's part of employment, if that makes sense, particularly if we've got performance or conduct issues. But you might offer different ways to do the meeting. So obviously offering a support person is a great way to kind of ease those nerves there. But you can also offer to do the meeting virtually. It can be over Teams. It might just, make it a little bit more comfortable. However, generally speaking, if there's no kind of safety concern that the employee raises as to why they can't be there, then it's a reasonable direction. And the employee, if they fail to attend or they continue to refuse to attend, then it could result in disciplinary action for that alone. So there's not much way around it. If there's a safety issue, we can look at different avenues of conducting the meeting or have someone else step in. But really, at the end of the day, it is reasonable to engage in these discussions as an employer. And yeah, there's not many reasons where you couldn't.
Yeah, and the employee's got to follow the policy of
That's it.
coming to those disciplinary meetings. Otherwise, it's a compounding issue of, well, here's another disciplinary meeting for not coming to that disciplinary meeting.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
Right,
And
and
we
that,
often lead determination in those points. Yeah.
right. Okay, so you can sort of expedite it even if they haven't come to the meeting to go to the next stage.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone's not willing to participate there, it becomes a different issue rather than the performance issue or the initial conduct issue. It becomes an issue of their failure to follow a reasonable and lawful, I should say, management direction.
Right.
And if it's just blatant non-participation, you can terminate on those grounds. Absolutely.
Brilliant. And the important thing for everyone here is obviously we've got a paper trail of trying to get that employee to
That's
comply.
it. Yep,
And if we're in an unfair dismissal claim, the first question the commissioner is going to ask employees, why didn't you follow reasonable management
that's
direction?
it.
You lose, we win. Have a nice day. And
Yeah, you'd absolutely hope that that's what they're asking.
that's That's the paper. That's the power of paper trail, I suppose, and the fact that
It
you're
is.
following, the correct process.
Yeah.
That leads on to this next question here. There's a few more. I think we've got a bit more time,
Yep.
but leads on to the next question. Is okay. So I've reluctantly come to this meeting. I'm being belligerent. I'm swearing. How do we manage that process during a meeting?
I actually had a client call yesterday with an employee who was swearing and carrying on and, lots of nice, colorful language coming out. And I think it's we did touch on it during the webinar around remaining cool, being professional during these meetings, and if a workplace kind of, sorry, that's the wrong word. If the employee becomes heated, it's trying to kind of calm them down. Everyone kind of reacts differently to different types of situations. Typically, when you were discussing someone's unsatisfactory performance or their unsatisfactory conduct, it tends to hit home and it's a bit of a soft point, and it can create that kind of negative response from a person. A lot of people don't know how to deal with negative feedback, and swearing, carrying on might just be that natural sort of response. Does not mean it's appropriate by any means. But it's important to identify when an employee may be speaking inappropriately, and address it from a professionalism's perspective. Address it professionally from a professionalism's perspective. You're not engaging professionally right now. Do you need to take a break? Do you want to take 5? Do you want to reconvene the meeting?
Mm,
We're only going to talk and we're only going to communicate if we can both be adults and we can both speak and conduct ourselves professionally.
mm,
And if that doesn't work, then I would often say can the meeting,
yeah,
reconvene. That person needs to go home or that person needs to step aside, and convene when you can talk in a more appropriate manner. That's key. You don't need to engage in the swearing and yelling and join the person who's doing it.
yes.
You just need to diffuse, really.
Yeah, okay. So it's quite common to just terminate a meeting and then say, "Look, we'll be in touch and
Yep,
reschedule this when you cool down." And
yep,
then maybe that follow-up letter would reiterate the fact that you're coming and you're being respectful,
yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so
Absolutely. Copy of
um,
a policy around professionalism and conduct, and um yeah, and really their conduct during that meeting can also be a disciplinary a matter of
mm,
disciplinary action at some point as well. So they
mm.
can't just speak like that and get away with it. It's definitely something that can be addressed.
Yeah, and it's fair to say, like with these letters that you're sending employees, you're saying very clearly that there's no outcome with this initial meeting. We're just having a chat. The
Yeah, it's
outcome
fact
is going
finding.
to be the follow-up meeting once we understand your side of the story based on the
Yep,
allegation or whether it's the performance or whatever it is.
yep,
So there shouldn't be any sort of pushback from employees, particularly if you've got strong policies in place
that's
that
right.
kind of spell out that grievance process or the performance process or the warning or termination or whatever it is.
Definitely.
Really important to have policies and procedures because once they sign off on them, then they have to adhere to them.
Well,
So
it's black and white to refer back to. You signed this policy saying you read and understood it. Why is your
mm,
conduct contravening that policy?
mm,
There you
absolutely.
go. It's a really easy way to connect the dots. This person knew what they were aware of and what the expectations were. They still went against it, and now we are addressing it. So it's another paper trail.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, most of these questions are anonymous, everyone, so that's why I'm not saying any name. And here's another anonymous one. So we have some older women in our team who tend to mother young female staff, often assigning them menial tasks or giving them extra work. This creates tensions as times have changed and younger women don't see themselves as juniors.
Yeah,
They're assertive and dynamic.
yeah.
However, raising the issues directly with either group tends to cause social unrest. How can we manage this dynamic in a respectful and constructive way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's a bit of a complex issue because we are teetering on the line of some discrimination aspects there. We've got people who are potentially above the age of 45. We've got really young people, but we've also got notes there that the question described around, sex, gender, that sort of thing that are really key. And the way we manage that situation, we need to do it delicately. Um, if anything, I think it's probably more appropriate to have these conversations one on one rather than trying to do this as a team environment, particularly if you get pushback. I would probably start by I'd imagine I think the question said that the younger people were raising the concerns about being mothered. So I would take those concerns and conduct an investigation process. Interview the people who are doing this mothering, and ask them, why are you doing this to this person? Why are you giving them extra work? Why are you giving them little tasks? Um, you know, it it also comes under a definition of micromanaging, really. So, why are you engaging that sort of manner? This person's quite capable. They don't need that kind of front-on support, or it's not your role to do that. Leave that up to the manager to focus on. You can work just as a colleague with them. I think have those discussions around setting expectations, because I often find that sometimes when you're older and you're in a bit more of a old-fashioned routine, you don't even notice that you're doing it, and sometimes bringing it to that person's attention can go, oh. No, I didn't mean to mother them. That's not what I was trying to do. And in that rate, they'll monitor it moving forward. You could also look at performance management for that. So if there is someone who's just blatantly refusing that they do it, but we can point out instances where they have, given them examples and go through a process of performance management, managing them, we absolutely can. But also if it escalates and this is something that someone just continues to do, well, it can land in a warning as well. And I think once you start getting to that point of a written warning, you're micromanaging people and it's making people uncomfortable in the workplace. Normally, having it in black and white on paper is a really good reminder to kind of step back. And I think that's also another opportunity as well. I guess on the and look, this is all circumstantial advice. I'd probably want to know more about what the dynamics are, but just on a kind of general basis, that's the kind of process I would follow. Some people will also look at it as more of a team environment thing as well. So whilst I said I wouldn't address it in a collective group, you could also address it from a team perspective or a broader perspective. So you could do a team meeting on, um, you know, uh, professionalism in the workplace and working together and supporting people but not controlling people, and you could have a general workplace discussion about that, not targeting anyone, just having a general training session on it, and give people the opportunity to ask questions and come forward if they have anything that they'd like to raise. Obviously I wouldn't be dealing with any complaints against particular people in a group environment, but it's also another opportunity to kind of maybe send the signals out that we've got some concerns in the workplace about this, and maybe that'll be enough to kind of get
Mm.
those others to kind of back off a little bit. But
Just
it's a hard balance to strike, and I think that this person who's posted this would really benefit from our support, because we can really break these processes down, and also handhold in engaging in those awkward conversations.
Yeah. So it's a double-edged sword. It's about raising awareness to the broader business about
Yeah,
this type of behavior is not acceptable, and also
yeah,
their one-on-one investigations
yeah,
to kind of weed out that bullying risk, which is a very real risk.
absolutely,
One more
absolutely.
question. There's a few more, but I've got one more question because this is very common as well. So,
Yep,
employees are often reluctant to come forward with grievances. So,
yep.
someone's asked that there's an employee has a grievance, they want to raise it that's affecting them and their group,
Mm,
but they don't want to formally complain. They just
yep.
want you to know as a manager.
Yep.
So, how do you best manage that situation?
Yeah. Um, you're kind of standing on a tightrope on this one, because you want to maintain your kind of relationship with that employee and that trust that I can bring this forward and I can trust you to know this information, and that there's no sort of negative consequence for that. But as an employer, you have an obligation to investigate. We talked about that onus. It's on the employer. So if you're aware of something happening in the business and you don't take action, then that's going to fall back on you. Even if you turn around and try and say, well, the employee said they didn't want me to do anything, it's just not going to cut it. So I think it's an unfortunate one. And I think it comes down to the business's ability to be a support system for the person who made the complaint. So, thank you for bringing this complaint to my attention. This is serious and we take it seriously. And we don't want you to continue to experience this behavior, this conduct, this environment within the workplace. So we want to look into this for you. Now, in some circumstances, you might be able to remain anonymity, and you could keep the person who's made the complaint anonymous. But we're all human. We're all quite investigative, and I'm sure that if I was brought into a meeting, or you allegedly did this, can you tell me about it? You'll put the dots together as to who might have raised the complaint. So sometimes we can make it anonymous, sometimes we can't. I think in instances where someone is expressing, I just wanted to tell you, but I don't want you to do anything about it. I think it's where you need to be reassuring, nothing or no steps that I take after this conversation are going to negatively impact you. The business will support you. Offer them employee assistance programs if that's something the business provides to employees. But also, touching base with them. At the end of the day, an investigation process is confidential. So any sort of template or any letter that I would draft for an investigation process to a respondent, to a witness, to a complainant, it's always going to have that tagline around this is confidential, do not discuss it with anyone. Now, of course, that doesn't always stop people, but if they do go and discuss it with others, or they go and discuss it to the complainant and they go, why'd you raise this complaint against me, and try and, have a confrontation, well, you can take disciplinary action against that because this person has not complied with a reasonable and lawful management direction. And if that's something that is quite serious in the circumstances, depending on what sort of allegations are there or things like that, it can most definitely lead to termination. And that's the other sentence that always goes on these letters is, um, if the allegations are substantiated, they could lead to disciplinary action up to and including the termination of your employment. So it's never off the cards.
Mm.
It's just whether it's a high risk to go down that path or whether we need to follow a few steps first to mitigate and minimize the risks. So I think coming back to your question, definitely you need to take action in some form. And I think in terms of maintaining the trust with your employee, at the end of the day, whilst the employee might feel scared, once they've seen the action take the business step in and support them and investigate it and take action against the person if it's necessary for whatever the conduct may have been, they're going to feel like they're supported even more. That the business is kind of backing them, and I think it creates a much more positive workplace culture that if I raise a concern, it's going to be acted upon. It's not just going to be pushed under the rug by HR or the manager. And yeah, it's really, really crucial.
Fantastic. Well, look, that's we've run out of time, but there are still over a dozen or so questions. So I'm so sorry that we can't get to everyone. Please look out for an email from us with a recording of this following a meeting today. And for everyone who has unanswered questions, I really encourage you to scan the QR code, ask to speak to me, Moz, Maury, or one of our other BDMs, and we will get those answers to your questions and more. So really appreciate everyone's time. Amelia, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for coming along today as well. And as I said, for all those attendees that we haven't answered the questions, we do want to answer them. So please scan the QR code, get in contact with us, ring our office, and we'll be happy to meet with you. All right. So thanks everyone for coming. Amelia, thank you again. And we look forward to seeing you next time.